you, yes you, are you an American citizen over the age of 18? If so, then this is your PSA to remind you of the upcoming election. Yes, that's right, another 2 years have passed and it's time once again to cast your ballots. Why should I care, you may ask? Why you should care? I'll tell you why you should care. Voting is your voice in this democracy. Your chance to express how you feel about who should be running the government that affects our everyday lives. And it's not just the presidency either, it's all sorts of things. Your representative and house, depending on your state, your senator, not to mention all the state and county level offices up for vote. It's your opportunity to decide what rules and policies we'll have going forward at all levels of government. It's your right as an American citizen to vote, to participate in our democracy. Many other countries ruled by authoritarians can only dream of this right, and here it is, as your birthright for being a citizen of this great nation. It's a power that carries great importance and great responsibility. So great, now you know why you should vote. The next question is how you can vote. Well, that's a little more tricky of a question, as the US election is really over 50 different elections happening at the same time. The rules and regulations around voting will vary based on which state or territory you live in. If you're not sure about the rules for your state, you can always Google them. There's plenty of great resources out there for you. So, this is the part of the video where I would have mentioned and then linked down in the description the How to Vote in Every State channel, a great YouTube channel by the Vlogbrothers, but unfortunately this year they're not doing it, so instead I'll link to the site that they link to, vote.org. I personally haven't vetted the site yet, but I trust their judgment on this one, and if you're not comfortable with that, that's fine. Like I said, there's plenty of resources that you can Google out there. So with all that in mind, for the rest of this video, I will be going over the voter registration process for my home state, the great state of Texas. The first thing I want to explain off the bat is that voter registration in Texas ends on October 7th. That means that is the last day to register to vote, so make sure you get all this registration stuff sorted out before then. I cannot stress this enough. You need to make sure you are clear before this date if you want to vote in Texas. With that said, it doesn't have to be that worrisome. You may actually be registered to vote already and just might not know it yet. To check registration status, simply go to this site. I'll leave a link down in the description. Once there, you can select your criteria. I personally use the date of birth and driver's license one, and enter your information. From there, it will show you some information, but the thing you need to check is your voter status and your effective date of registration. If voter status is active and the effective date of registration is before the election date, you are good to go. In addition, the site also shows you upcoming election dates, and when you click it, it'll show you voting locations, which is nifty, and I will be talking about that later. But okay, so let's say you've checked and it says your voter status is inactive. Then what do? Well, in that case, you go to this site instead. Again, links in the down there part. From here, you have a few options, but the easiest is an online voter application. Click this link, then fill out the form with your information. Then click continue. After that, it turns your answers into an application that you mail to your voter registrar office. Yes, you have to physically mail the thing via snail mail. I know, it's really stupid and archaic, but you only have to do this once provided you vote frequently, so it's a small inconvenience to pay. So from here, you print out the form and then put it in an envelope with the address of your voting registrar office, and then send it in the mail. And provided you did that before the October 7th deadline, you should be good to go. Just to be safe, you can always check the site I first mentioned, the voter registration status site, if you're ever concerned. Once that says your voter status is active, you're good to go. Finally, you can vote in the election. So now on to the next question. How and when can I vote? Obviously, you can vote on November 5th itself, so that's an option. However, if you're worried that the line will be too long or you can't get out of work in time to cast your ballot, you have other options. The first is voting by mail. This is a very popular method of voting and one that's popularity is growing even further. However, Texas makes it unnecessarily difficult, and you're probably already sick of snail mail from just registering for the thing, and personally that's not how I prefer to vote, so I won't go over it here. With that said, I will also link the website for voting by mail in the state of Texas if you're interested, and there's plenty of resources out there to help you with this form of voting. Like I said, it's a very popular form that is only growing in popularity. So with that out of the way, I will instead be talking about another form of voting, early voting. Early voting is when you can vote ahead of the November 5th election date and instead vote in October. Early voting begins October 21st and ends November 1st. Those dates, alongside the October 7th registration date, are the ones you need to remember. Seriously, if there's anything you take away from this video, it's these dates. So now you know the when. What about the where? Well, as I explained earlier, on the site where you check your voter registration status, to the right there is a list of upcoming elections. When you click on it, it will show you a pop-up of all the voting locations in your area. Personally, there's this fire station near my house that's usually a voting location, but if that's not available, I vote at my local community college, which is always the voting location for me. So there you have it. Check the list, pick a place, decide a date, prepare to vote. Make sure you go into voting with a plan on the when and where. Alright, we're registered, and we've made a plan on when and where to vote. Now comes the hard part, deciding who to vote for. This is the part that I feel is most contentious. After all, this is where things swerve from civic duty into politics. There isn't a right answer, so I'm going to show you some of my favorite sources for gathering information on candidates. One of my personal favorites is a site called Vote 411. They do a pretty good job of organizing all the offices and showing who's running for what. They also reach out to candidates to gather their stances on several issues. I've been using them for a while now, so they get my seal of approval. Another great site is Ballotopedia. This site is actually mostly election information archives, but it also has great information on the candidates. Like 411, they have a section dedicated to the stances on the issues for the candidates, though admittedly their questions are a bit too fluffy and non-policy for my taste. But they also have information on things like what politicians and organizations endorsed the candidate, and where their finances come from. Speaking of campaign finance, the last site I want to talk about is Open Secrets, which tracks specifically where each candidate's campaign money comes from, so you have an idea of what companies and PACs have bought each candidate. This site is a little more niche than others and a bit more confusing to normal Americans who don't follow politics super close, but I still feel that it's important, as money more than anything else decides how a candidate will vote, and knowing who's paying them helps inform you about what decisions they will make. Alright, now we're in the endgame. You've looked through all the information, you've decided on your candidates, you've already made your plans on when and where to vote. It's time to put that plan to action. Except stop. We have one last hurdle we need to overcome before we can vote, and that is make sure that you have a valid voter ID. 90% of the time you will just use your driver's license, but if you don't have that, you have 6 other options: your passport, a personal ID, a Texas election ID certificate, a Texas handgun license, a U.S. citizenship certificate with a photo, or a U.S. military ID card. Note that your student ID card is not a valid voter ID, despite it having your face and name on it. Yet a handgun license is? Thank you, Texas government! Failing to have any of those, you can still vote if you sign a reasonable impediment declaration and come in with your birth certificate, a utility bill, your paycheck, a government check, or a government document with your name and address on it, which includes your voting registration certificate. And as with so much else in this video, this is for Texas elections. Your state elections may have different rules and regulations that make it less or more difficult. Heck, I'm pretty sure there are some states where you A, are automatically registered to vote when you turn 18, and B, you don't need an ID to vote. Lucky. I'm just using Texas because it is the one I know on account of living here. Alright, so you've gone past the attendants after showing them your ID, and you are now at the voting booth. Finally, you can vote. You can vote based on memory, or you can have a written copy of your choices. Usually the attendants give out a sample ballot that you can fill out before voting that you can bring. But you can also bring your own little journal with all your choices written down. I personally use a small blue journal that I keep in my pocket, but the most important thing you need to know when it comes to bringing notes to the voting booth is do not use your phone. That is super not allowed and you can get in trouble. Any extra materials must be in written offline form, not electronics. Do not fumble on the goal line that way. And with that, you now know the process for letting your voice be heard in government. Again, at least here in Texas. As I've said many times, each state will have its own rules for how the election is run, and the methods I've laid out are just for my home state. There are plenty of resources out there to learn how your state does its elections. As you've seen, it can be a little hectic and confusing, but it's all worth it to have a say in how things run, have a say in who represents us in government, a say in the direction our country, state, counties, and cities go in. It's a great power we have, not one to be taken lightly. It's one that requires a lot of research, thought, and consideration. But luckily, we live in an age where we have so much access to information. It's easier now than it's ever been in history for us to be able to make an informed decision. So, sometime in the next few weeks, I hope you take your time to do some research, look up your candidates, decide what you want, and go out and vote. Because there is nothing more American than democracy. And as an American, your vote is your stay in that democracy.